The marble floors of First Carolina Trust gleamed under the crystal chandeliers as Marcus Thompson pushed through the heavy glass doors, his worn work boots leaving faint traces of red clay. It was 11:15 on a Thursday morning in September of 2022, and the bank's main branch in Charlotte's upscale South Park district was bustling with its usual clientele of business executives and wealthy retirees. Marcus wore what he always wore during harvest season: faded denim jeans with dirt stains around the knees, a simple gray t-shirt beneath a plaid flannel jacket, and a Carolina Panthers baseball cap pulled low over his graying hair. In his right hand, he carried a weathered canvas duffel bag, the kind you might pick up at an army surplus store for $20. The bag was heavy, stuffed with $47,000 in cash from the week's produce sales at the Charlotte Regional Farmers Market. He approached the teller line, waiting patiently behind a woman in a Chanel suit who was depositing what appeared to be a corporate check. As he stood there, rolling his shoulders to work out the tension from 5 hours of loading trucks before dawn, he noticed the stares. A man in a three-piece suit glanced at him, then at the bag, then whispered something to his companion. Two women near the wealth management desk stopped their conversation to look him over, their expressions shifting from curiosity to concern. Marcus had seen those looks before. He knew exactly what they were thinking. A black man in work clothes carrying a heavy bag into an upscale bank. The math their prejudice calculated was always the same, and it was never in his favor. But nobody in that bank knew who Marcus Thompson really was. And in the next 5 minutes, everything would change. If you believe that justice should reach those who discriminate based on appearance, and that hidden power makes the best plot twist, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Now, let's get to what really happened that day. Marcus had been coming to this particular branch for the past 3 weeks, always on Thursday mornings, always dressed the same way. It was part of what his executive team called ground-level assessments, though Marcus preferred to think of it as simply seeing the truth. He had built Thompson Agricultural Holdings from a single 40-acre family farm into a $3.2 billion empire that controlled farmland across 7 states. And he had done it by never forgetting what it felt like to have dirt under his fingernails. The bank's regional manager, a thin woman named Patricia Chen, had helped him twice before without ever asking his last name beyond what was on his deposit slips. She had been professional, efficient, even warm. Today, though, Patricia was off, attending some conference in Raleigh. The teller who called him forward was new, a young man barely out of college named Brandon, who processed his deposit with fumbling hands and nervous glances at the amount. $47,000, Brandon muttered, counting the stacks of bills for the 3rd time. "Sir, where did this money come from?" Marcus kept his voice even, the same calm drawl he used when negotiating with distributors or speaking to farmhands. "Produce sales. Been selling at the market all week. Do you have receipts?" "In the bag, bottom pocket." Brandon's hands shook slightly as he verified the paperwork. Everything was legitimate, of course. Every dollar had been earned legally, taxed properly, documented thoroughly. But Marcus could see the doubt in the young teller's eyes, could feel the weight of assumptions being made about him based solely on how he looked standing there in his work clothes. What Brandon didn't know, what nobody in that bank knew, was that the very building they stood in was owned by a holding company that Marcus controlled. First Carolina Trust was one of 18 regional banks under the Thompson Financial Services umbrella, a subsidiary of his agricultural empire that he had acquired 6 years ago to ensure his farming operations had reliable credit lines during volatile growing seasons. The teller finished the deposit, handed Marcus a receipt, and Marcus was turning to leave when he heard the voice that would change everything. "Excuse me, sir. Stop right there." The voice came from near the executive offices, sharp and commanding. Marcus turned to see a woman in her early 50s striding toward him across the marble floor, her heels clicking with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. Victoria Hartwell, the bank's CEO, had been appointed 8 months ago with a mandate to increase profits and reduce risk. She had an MBA from Wharton, 20 years of experience in corporate banking, and a reputation for being ruthless, with both underperforming employees and clients she deemed unsuitable for the bank's upscale image. She also had no idea who Marcus was. Victoria Hartwell had been standing in the doorway of her corner office, finishing a conference call with the bank's board of directors, when she noticed the man at the teller window. Her first thought was that security protocols had failed. Her second thought was that someone was going to be fired for allowing this situation to develop. "Brandon," she called out, her voice cutting through the ambient conversation in the lobby. "Step away from the window, please." The young teller froze, looking between his CEO and the customer who had just completed a legitimate transaction. "Ma'am, I was just finishing. I said step away." Victoria crossed the remaining distance to the teller window, her eyes fixed on Marcus with the kind of scrutiny usually reserved for suspicious account activity. "Sir, I'm going to need to see some identification, and I'm going to need to know where you got that money." Marcus met her gaze calmly. "Just made a deposit. All legal." The teller verified everything. "I'm sure he did his best," Victoria said, her tone suggesting that Brandon's best was inadequate. "But $47,000 in cash is unusual for someone in your situation. We have protocols for large cash deposits, especially when they fit certain profiles." The word profiles hung in the air like smoke. Around them, other customers had stopped their transactions to watch. Marcus could see phones being lifted, cameras activating. In 2022, everything was documented, everything went viral. He had counted on that. "The money's from produce sales," Marcus said again, his voice still even. "I have receipts, tax documentation, everything your teller needed to verify the deposit." Victoria's smile was cold. "I'm sure you have paperwork. People in your line of work always have paperwork. But let me be clear about something." She stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough that it felt intimate, threatening. "This bank serves a particular clientele. We maintain certain standards. And when someone walks in here looking like they just crawled out of a field, carrying a bag full of cash, it raises questions." "What questions would those be?" Marcus asked quietly. "Don't play stupid with me," Victoria snapped. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. Drug money gets laundered through all kinds of businesses. Farmers markets, food trucks, cash operations that are impossible to track. You think I don't know how this works?" Behind her, a security guard had materialized, a thick-necked man named Raymond, who had worked bank security for 15 years. Victoria glanced at him, then back at Marcus. "I think we need to call the police," she said. "Let them verify where this money really came from." Raymond, the security guard, shifted his weight, his hand moving instinctively toward the radio on his belt. "Ma'am, you want me to detain him?" "I want you to make sure he doesn't leave until we get some answers," Victoria said. She turned to address the lobby, her voice carrying. "I apologize for the disruption, everyone. We're just ensuring the safety and integrity of our institution." A woman near the wealth management desk, someone Marcus vaguely recognized from charity galas he had attended in his actual capacity as a billionaire CEO, pulled out her phone and started recording. "Oh my God," she whispered to her companion, loud enough for Marcus to hear. "Is this really happening?" "Probably drugs," her companion whispered back. "I mean, look at him." A man in a Brooks Brothers suit waiting to meet with a loan officer stepped forward. "I appreciate you taking security seriously," he said to Victoria. "Can't be too careful these days." Victoria acknowledged him with a nod, emboldened by the support. "Exactly. We have a responsibility to our legitimate customers." She turned back to Marcus, her confidence growing with each passing second of his silence. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to empty your pockets, you're going to show us every piece of identification you have, and you're going to explain in detail where every dollar of that money came from. And if your story doesn't add up, the police will sort it out downtown." Marcus stood perfectly still, his expression neutral. He had faced down corporate raiders trying to steal his company, agricultural conglomerates attempting hostile takeovers, even a senator who had tried to block his expansion into new markets. This woman, standing here in her $1,000 suit, throwing around accusations based on nothing but the color of his skin and the clothes on his back, was beneath his concern. But she didn't know that yet. "I'm not emptying anything," Marcus said quietly. "I made a legal deposit. Your teller processed it. I'm leaving now." "No," Victoria said, stepping directly into his path. "You're not." She reached out and grabbed his forearm, her manicured nails digging into the fabric of his flannel jacket. The physical contact sent a ripple of shock through the lobby. Several people gasped. More phones came out. "Ma'am," Brandon the teller said nervously. "Maybe we should just—" "Be quiet, Brandon," Victoria snapped. "You've done enough damage by processing this without calling me first." She tightened her grip on Marcus's arm. "Raymond, call the police. Tell them we have a suspected money laundering situation." Marcus looked down at her hand on his arm, then back up at her face. "Let go of me." "Or what?" Victoria's eyes flashed with something ugly, something that had probably always been there beneath the professional veneer. "You going to do something? Go ahead, try it. Give me a reason to have you arrested for assault on top of everything else." The shift in Victoria's demeanor was striking. What had started as professional suspicion had evolved into something more personal, more cruel. She was enjoying this, Marcus realized. The power dynamic, the audience, the chance to be seen as the vigilant guardian, protecting her upscale bank from undesirable elements. "You know what I think?" Victoria said, loud enough for everyone in the lobby to hear. "I think you walked into the wrong bank. There are plenty of check-cashing places in the other parts of town, places more suited to your kind of business. But you came here because you thought a black man in a fancy bank wouldn't raise suspicions. Well, you were wrong." A woman near the door actually applauded. Marcus saw her face, memorized it. Approximately 40 years old, blonde highlights, wearing yoga pants, and a designer hoodie. She had her phone up, recording, smiling like she was watching a reality show. "Finally," the woman said to someone on her phone, apparently live streaming. "Someone with the guts to say what we're all thinking." Victoria turned to acknowledge her supporter, and in that moment of distraction, Marcus tried to step around her. She moved fast, surprising him. Her other hand came up holding a coffee cup, a ceramic mug with the bank's logo on it that had been sitting on the nearby counter. Whether she meant to block him or simply reacted without thinking, Marcus would never know. But the result was immediate and spectacular. The coffee, still hot from the executive break room, splashed across Marcus's chest and neck. Dark liquid soaked into his flannel shirt, spreading in an irregular stain that looked almost black against the faded fabric. Some of it splattered onto his face, hot enough to sting but not quite hot enough to burn. The mug fell from Victoria's hand, shattering on the marble floor with a sound like a gunshot. The lobby went silent. "Oh," Victoria said, but there was no apology in her voice. "You made me spill my coffee." Marcus stood there, coffee dripping from his chin onto his shirt, and did absolutely nothing. He didn't wipe his face. He didn't curse. He didn't raise his voice. He simply looked at Victoria Hartwell with an expression of such perfect calm that it should have terrified her. It didn't. Not yet. "Look at you," Victoria continued, her voice taking on a mocking tone. "All wet. Maybe next time you'll think twice before you walk into an establishment you don't belong in." She glanced at Raymond. "Get him out of here. And make sure corporate knows we stopped a potential laundering operation. I want credit for this." Raymond hesitated, looking uncomfortable for the first time. "Ma'am, he did complete a legal deposit. Maybe we should just—" "Are you questioning me?" Victoria's voice went ice cold. "Because I can have your replacement here by this afternoon." Raymond's jaw tightened, but he stepped forward, reaching for Marcus's other arm. "Sir, you need to come with me." Around them, the lobby had transformed into a theater. At least 12 people were recording now. Someone near the door was narrating into their phone. "This is insane. The CEO just threw coffee on him. This is definitely going viral." An older gentleman in a suit, someone who looked like he belonged in the bank's wealth management program, shook his head slowly. "Disgraceful," he muttered. but Marcus couldn't tell if he meant the treatment or Marcus's presence. Victoria pulled a handkerchief from her pocket, wiping the few drops of coffee that had splashed onto her own suit. "Everyone, I apologize for the spectacle. But this is what vigilance looks like. This is how we protect your assets, your security. Sometimes it's not pretty, but it's necessary." More applause. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to make Marcus understand exactly what he was dealing with. Not just one bigoted CEO, but a whole system of people ready to believe the worst based on appearance, ready to applaud discrimination when it was dressed up as security. And all of it was being recorded. Marcus reached up slowly and wiped the coffee from his face with the back of his hand. He didn't look at Victoria, didn't acknowledge Raymond's grip on his arm. Instead, he looked around the lobby, making eye contact with each person who was recording, with each person who had applauded, with each person who had simply stood there and watched. Then he spoke, his voice so quiet that everyone had to strain to hear it. "You finished?" 3 words. That was all. Victoria blinked, momentarily thrown off by the simplicity of the question. "What? You finished?" Marcus repeated. "Because I have somewhere to be." He gently but firmly removed his arm from Raymond's grip. The security guard, perhaps sensing something he couldn't quite name in Marcus's demeanor, let him go. Marcus adjusted his flannel jacket, seemingly unbothered by the coffee stains spreading across the fabric. "You can't just leave," Victoria sputtered. "I told Raymond to detain you. We're calling the police." "Call them," Marcus said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet, extracting a simple business card. He held it out to Victoria. "Have them contact this number. I'm sure they'll clear everything up." Victoria snatched the card, barely glancing at it before shoving it into her pocket. "Don't think some fake business card is going to save you. I've seen every scam there is." Marcus nodded slowly, as if she had said something wise rather than something foolish. Then he turned and walked toward the door, his wet boots leaving faint tracks on the marble floor. Nobody tried to stop him. Up. Something about the absolute dignity in his movements, the complete absence of fear or anger, had created a zone of silence around him that even Victoria's authority couldn't penetrate. As he pushed through the glass doors into the warm September sunlight, he heard Victoria's voice behind him, triumphant and loud. "Everyone see that? That's what happens when you try to pull something in my bank." He ran. They always run when they're guilty. The doors closed behind Marcus, cutting off the sound of her voice. He walked to his truck, a dusty F-250 parked in the visitor lot, and sat in the driver's seat for a moment, looking at his coffee-stained reflection in the rearview mirror. Then he pulled out his phone and made a single call. "Sarah," he said when his executive assistant answered, "get me the board of directors for First Carolina Trust. Emergency meeting, 30 minutes. All of them, sir. Every single one. And Sarah? Pull Victoria Hartwell's complete employment file. I want to know everything." "Yes, Mr. Thompson." He hung up and started the truck. Nobody inside that bank understood the significance of his calm. They had mistaken his silence for weakness, his dignity for defeat. They would learn the difference soon enough. Did you see the calm with which he left? Could you maintain that dignity? Leave your answer in the comments. Inside First Carolina Trust, the energy was still high. Victoria stood near the teller window, accepting congratulations from several customers who praised her vigilance. The woman in yoga pants was still live streaming, narrating the aftermath to her followers. So the CEO literally threw coffee on this guy who was obviously trying to launder drug money or something, and she totally stood her ground. This is the kind of leadership we need. No more political correctness. Finally, someone with the guts to call it like it is. Brandon, the teller, was cleaning up the broken coffee mug, his hands shaking slightly. He had pulled the business card the customer had tried to give Victoria from the trash where she had thrown it after the man left. The card was simple, cream-colored stock with black lettering. Marcus Thompson, Chairman and CEO, Thompson Agricultural Holdings. There was a phone number. Nothing else. Brandon stared at it for a long moment, a cold feeling spreading through his chest. The name meant nothing to him. But something about the simplicity of the card, the lack of any marketing or flash, bothered him. "Ma'am," he said quietly, approaching Victoria. "That card he gave you. I think maybe you should look at it." "I don't need to look at some fake business card," Victoria said dismissively. "Probably printed them at FedEx this morning." But she pulled it from her pocket anyway, glanced at it, and laughed. "Thompson Agricultural Holdings, sure. And I'm the Queen of England." Raymond, the security guard, was less certain. He had worked security long enough to develop instincts about people, and something about the way that man had carried himself, the complete absence of fear, even when surrounded and accused, didn't fit the profile of a money launderer or drug dealer. "Maybe we should at least verify," Raymond suggested. "Just call the number, see what happens." "And waste my time on a wild goose chase?" Victoria shook her head. "I have a board meeting in 20 minutes, conference call about third-quarter earnings. I'm not going to be late because you're having second thoughts about someone who clearly didn't belong here." But even as she said it, her phone buzzed. A text from her assistant. "Board meeting moved up. Emergency session. 15 minutes. Your presence required immediately." Victoria frowned. Emergency board meetings weren't scheduled with 15 minutes notice. Something was wrong. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from David Morrison, the board chairman. Subject line, "Urgent disciplinary matter." The cold feeling that had started in Brandon's chest was now spreading through Victoria's. She opened the email, read the first line, and felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. "Ma'am," Brandon ventured, "are you okay?" Victoria didn't answer. She was rereading the email, hoping the words would change. They didn't. The board meeting was held via video conference, 9 faces arranged in a grid on the large monitor in Victoria's office. She had closed the door, told her assistant to hold all calls, and tried to compose herself before accepting the conference invitation. David Morrison's face filled the center square, his expression grim. He was 72 years old, a retired banking executive who had served on various boards for 3 decades. Victoria had always found him tedious but harmless, a relic of an older generation who rubber-stamped whatever management proposed. Today, he looked anything but harmless. "Victoria," David said without preamble, "are you aware of what happened in your lobby approximately 45 minutes ago?" Victoria's mind raced. "If you're referring to the security situation we handled, yes. I personally intervened to prevent what appeared to be a money laundering attempt. I was just about to file a report with—" "Stop talking," David said quietly. Victoria stopped, shocked into silence. Board members didn't speak to CEOs that way, not unless something had gone very, very wrong. "Do you know who Marcus Thompson is?" asked another board member, a woman named Patricia Okonkwo, who ran a private equity firm in Atlanta. "Some farmer who tried to deposit suspicious cash," Victoria said, her confidence wavering. "I handled it according to protocol." "According to protocol," David repeated slowly. "You threw coffee on him. You accused him of drug trafficking. You had security detain him. You did all of this in front of at least a dozen witnesses who recorded the entire incident. Does that sound like protocol to you?" Victoria's mouth went dry. He was acting suspiciously. "Large cash deposit, no appointment, dressed inappropriately for our clientele. Marcus Thompson," Patricia interrupted, "is the founder and CEO of Thompson Agricultural Holdings, a company valued at $3.2 billion. His company owns controlling interest in Thompson Financial Services. Thompson Financial Services owns this bank. Victoria, you just assaulted and falsely accused your boss's boss's boss." The words didn't make sense at first. Victoria heard them, processed them individually, but couldn't quite fit them together into a coherent picture. "That's not possible," she whispered. "He was wearing work clothes. He looked like what, Victoria?" David's voice was steel. "Say it. Tell us exactly what he looked like to you." Victoria realized she was trapped. Anything she said would condemn her. He didn't identify himself. He didn't need to identify himself to make a legal deposit at his own bank, Patricia said. "But for your information, he has been visiting branches across the southeast for the past 3 months. conducting undercover assessments of customer service and checking whether our institutions maintain the inclusive, professional standards we claim to uphold. Your branch was scheduled for a formal assessment next month. He moved it up because he wanted to see how you treated customers when you thought nobody important was watching. Victoria felt like she was drowning. I didn't know. That's the point, David said. You weren't supposed to know. And when you didn't know, when you thought you were dealing with someone who couldn't fight back, you revealed exactly who you are. On the monitor, another board member cleared his throat. I've been reviewing the videos. There are at least 15 different recordings already posted online. The hashtag #BankCEORacism is trending in North Carolina. We've had 68,000 views in the last 30 minutes. Victoria pulled up Twitter on her computer with shaking hands. The videos were everywhere. Different angles, different perspectives, but all showing the same scene. Her grabbing Marcus Thompson, accusing him, throwing coffee on him while he stood there with quiet dignity. The comments were brutal. This is what systemic racism looks like. Hope she loses everything. Anyone know which bank this is? Never banking there again. The way he just walked out with dignity, though. King. Her phone started ringing. The bank's PR department, the legal department, news outlets requesting comment. David Morrison's voice cut through Victoria's panic. We have Mr. Thompson on the line. He's agreed to join this meeting. A new square appeared on the monitor. Marcus Thompson, still in his coffee-stained flannel shirt, sitting in what appeared to be a truck. Behind him, Victoria could see the parking lot of her own bank. Mr. Thompson, David said, his tone shifting to something close to deference. Thank you for joining us. Marcus nodded. I appreciate the quick response, David. Victoria stared at the screen, her mind still struggling to reconcile the man she had humiliated with the title chairman and CEO. Mr. Thompson, I had no idea. Ms. Hartwell. Marcus's voice was calm, almost gentle. Let me stop you there. You're about to say you didn't know who I was, that if you had known, you would have treated me differently. That's true, I'm sure, but that's exactly the problem. He adjusted his phone, bringing his face more fully into frame. I've been conducting these assessments for 3 months. I visited 15 branches across our network. In most of them, I was treated with courtesy and professionalism. Some tellers were confused by the large cash deposits, which is fine. That's actually good. We should verify unusual transactions. But they were respectful. They followed protocol without making assumptions. Marcus paused, and when he continued, there was an edge in his voice that Victoria had not heard before. You didn't follow protocol, Ms. Hartwell. You made assumptions based on my appearance. You grabbed me. You threw coffee on me. You accused me of drug trafficking with zero evidence, and you did it because you saw a black man in work clothes and assumed criminality. That's not protocol. That's prejudice. I made a mistake in judgment, Victoria said desperately. But I was trying to protect the bank's interests. By assaulting a customer making a legal deposit, by publicly humiliating someone based on their race and clothing, those are the bank's interests. Patricia Okonkwo spoke up. Mr. Thompson, we've reviewed your proposal. The board is in agreement. Marcus nodded. Then let's proceed. Victoria looked between the board members' faces, seeing a unanimity that terrified her. Proposal? What proposal? David Morrison pulled out a document, holding it up to his camera. Victoria Hartwell, effective immediately, you are terminated from your position as CEO of First Carolina Trust. You will surrender all company property, including your company car, phone, and laptop, within 24 hours. Your stock options, which had a current value of approximately $12 million, are hereby forfeited per the conduct clause in your employment contract. The words hit Victoria like physical blows. You can't do this. I have a contract, which includes a clause about conduct unbecoming and actions that damage the bank's reputation, Patricia said. I'm looking at 73,000 views now, Victoria. 90% negative sentiment. 3 corporate clients have already called to express concerns. This isn't just bad PR. This is a catastrophic failure of leadership and judgment. Marcus spoke again, his voice still calm. Ms. Hartwell, I'm also filing a formal complaint with the FDIC regarding discriminatory practices at this branch. Additionally, my legal team will be filing a civil lawsuit for assault, battery, false imprisonment, and defamation. You'll be hearing from them by end of business today. Mr. Thompson, please. Victoria heard herself begging. I apologize. Sincerely. I was wrong. I'll do anything to make this right. Anything. Marcus's expression didn't change. Then you can start by being honest. Look at that camera and tell everyone watching exactly why you treated me the way you did. Victoria opened her mouth, but no words came out. What could she say? That she had seen a black man in work clothes and made assumptions? That she had let her prejudices override her professionalism? That she had enjoyed the power of humiliating someone she thought couldn't fight back? All of it was true. None of it was excusable. I thought not, Marcus said quietly. He looked at David. Proceed with the termination. And David, I want a complete review of hiring and training practices across all our branches. This can't happen again. It won't, sir. Marcus ended his connection. The square with his face went black, leaving only the board members and Victoria's own reflection in the monitor's glass. The next 72 hours were a masterclass in how quickly a life could unravel. Victoria's termination was announced publicly at 4:30 that afternoon. The bank's communications team released a statement expressing zero tolerance for discrimination and confirming that the employee responsible had been terminated. They didn't name Victoria, but they didn't need to. The videos had her face, her name tag, her voice. By 6 p.m., the story had been picked up by local news. By 9 p.m., it was national. CNN ran a segment titled, "Banking While Black." CEO fired after racist incident. The footage of Victoria throwing coffee on Marcus Thompson played in an endless loop, juxtaposed with his calm exit and the revelation of his true identity. Victoria's lawyer, a corporate attorney named Mitchell who specialized in executive employment contracts, called her at 11 p.m. with bad news. The conduct clause is ironclad, Mitchell said. They have video evidence of you committing assault. That's grounds for immediate termination with cause. The stock options are gone, Victoria. All 12 million. What about severance? After assault and creating a viral discrimination incident? You're lucky they're not trying to claw back your previous bonuses. Mitchell sighed. Victoria, I'm going to be honest with you. Thompson's legal team contacted me this afternoon. They're not just filing a civil suit, they're also filing a criminal complaint for assault and battery. Victoria's hand trembled around the phone. Criminal? For spilling coffee? For throwing hot coffee on someone in an act of aggression? There's a difference, and 12 different video angles prove intent. The DA's office is reviewing it now. On day 2, the woman who had live-streamed the incident and applauded Victoria's actions found herself trending for all the wrong reasons. Internet sleuths identified her as Melissa Bradshaw, a real estate agent with a luxury firm in Charlotte. Her social media feeds filled with complaints about those people and thinly veiled racism were screenshot and spread widely. By noon, her firm had released a statement announcing her termination and apologizing to the community. Raymond, the security guard, who had reluctantly followed Victoria's orders, was placed on administrative leave pending review. Brandon, the teller, who had simply processed a legal transaction, was promoted to assistant manager and given a raise. Patricia Chen, the regular branch manager who had been at a conference, returned to find her branch at the center of a national controversy. The viral spread was exponential. By day 3, the video had 40 million views across all platforms. Late-night comedians made jokes about it. Social media activists used it as a teaching moment about unconscious bias and systemic racism. Business schools added it to case studies about corporate ethics and crisis management. Thompson Agricultural Holdings released their own statement on the 3rd day, carefully worded by their legal and PR teams. Mr. Thompson regularly visits our facilities and partner organizations to ensure we maintain the highest standards of service and inclusion. The incident at First Carolina Trust represented a fundamental failure of these standards. We are conducting a comprehensive review of all our financial services operations and implementing mandatory anti-bias training for all employees. We remain committed to creating environments where all people are treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their appearance or background. The statement was accompanied by a photo of Marcus Thompson in a business suit, standing in front of his company's headquarters, looking every inch the billionaire CEO. The contrast with the work clothes-wearing farmer in the viral video was striking and intentional. Victoria watched it all from her apartment, which suddenly felt too large and too empty. Her friends stopped calling. Her professional network went silent. LinkedIn messages from recruiters dried up. One headhunter she had worked with for years sent a terse email. "Given the current situation, we are unable to represent you at this time." On the fourth day, the criminal complaint was officially filed. Victoria's mugshot, taken at the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, was somehow leaked and added to the growing collection of images associated with the incident. Assault and battery charges. Bail set at $50,000, which she paid from her rapidly dwindling savings. The civil lawsuit followed on day 5. Marcus Thompson's legal team filed a complaint seeking damages for assault, battery, false imprisonment, defamation, and emotional distress. The amount? $15 million. Victoria's lawyer called again. "They're going for the throat." With the video evidence and the criminal charges, this is going to be very difficult to defend. I strongly recommend we try to settle. "With what?" Victoria's voice was hollow. "I just lost $12 million in stock options. Legal fees are going to bankrupt me. Then we'll argue for a payment plan. But Victoria, this is Marcus Thompson. The man is worth billions. He doesn't need your money. This is about principle. He's making an example." He was. Victoria understood that now. This wasn't about the coffee, or even about her specifically. This was about every person who had ever been judged by their appearance, every person who had been treated as less than because of their race or class or the clothes they wore. Marcus Thompson had the power to fight back, and he was using it not just for himself, but as a message to everyone watching. Don't judge people by how they look. You never know who you're really dealing with. The message was being received. Victoria's inbox filled with hate mail. Her social media accounts, which she hastily deleted, had been flooded with thousands of comments. Some were supportive, mostly from people who shared her prejudices, but they were drowned out by the overwhelming tide of condemnation. Someone created a parody Twitter account called Coffee Cup CEO that gained 100,000 followers in 2 days. Memes proliferated. Political commentators used the incident to discuss everything from systemic racism to economic inequality to the importance of workplace diversity training. And through it all, Marcus Thompson said nothing more. He had made his statement. He had taken his actions. The rest was simply consequences playing out as they inevitably must. 6 months later, the legal proceedings had concluded. Victoria Hartwell pled no contest to misdemeanor assault charges and received probation, community service, and mandatory bias training. The civil lawsuit was settled out of court for an undisclosed amount, though sources close to the case suggested it was in the high 7 figures. Victoria sold her house to pay legal fees and the settlement. Her career in banking was effectively over. No institution would hire someone with her record, her reputation, her viral infamy. She took a job as a consultant for a small firm in another state, making a fraction of her former salary, living in a modest apartment, her life permanently diminished by those 5 minutes of prejudice made public. Raymond, the security guard, was quietly let go after the review found he should have questioned Victoria's orders. Brandon, the teller, thrived in his promotion, becoming a model for how to handle unusual situations with professionalism and respect. Patricia Chen, the branch manager, implemented new training protocols that became standard across all Thompson Financial Services institutions. Melissa Bradshaw, the woman who had live-streamed and applauded the incident, filed for bankruptcy after losing both her job and a defamation lawsuit from another client who proved her racism had cost them a home sale. Her social media presence, once a source of validation, became a cautionary tale. The bank branch itself underwent renovations, both physical and cultural. New policies were implemented. Diversity and inclusion training became mandatory. Signs were posted reminding employees and customers alike that First Carolina Trust served everyone with equal dignity and respect. Marcus Thompson never publicly spoke about the incident beyond his initial statements. He didn't need to. The videos spoke for themselves. The consequences spoke for themselves. The message had been received not just by Victoria Hartwell, but by millions who watched her fall from grace. He continued his undercover assessments of Thompson Financial Services branches, though his methods evolved. The incident had proven both the necessity of such oversight and its potential risks. But Marcus Thompson had not built a $3.2 billion empire by avoiding risks. He had built it by confronting reality honestly, by refusing to accept that things had to stay the way they were. In corporate meetings, in business school classrooms, in diversity training sessions across the country, the incident became known simply as the coffee incident. It was studied, analyzed, picked apart for lessons about bias, about power, about the importance of treating every person with dignity, regardless of their appearance. The lesson was simple. When you judge someone based on how they look, when you treat them as less than human because of their race or their clothes or your assumptions about who they must be, you're not just being cruel, you're being stupid, because you never know who you're really dealing with. You never know whose power you're underestimating. You never know when the person you're humiliating might be the person who controls your fate. Victoria Hartwell learned that lesson the hardest way possible. She learned it in front of 40 million people. She learned it through the loss of her career, her reputation, her financial security. She learned it in a way she would never forget and could never undo. And Marcus Thompson, who had endured her prejudice with calm dignity, who had walked away without anger or violence, who had simply allowed the system he controlled to deliver justice, had taught it without ever raising his voice. That was power, real power. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself because it knows its own worth. This case reminds us that no one should be judged by their appearance. Justice, when it comes, is complete and irreversible. Were you able to catch the signs that something was wrong throughout the narrative? Share your theories in the comments. If you enjoyed this story of poetic justice, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Leave a like if this story inspired you, and share it with someone who believes that hidden power makes the best plot twist.